And you've actually, I assume my time starts, you're mixing two items there, and I appreciate that. One is the achievement gap, and one is how to compensate teachers and reward performance. First off, to answer the question, do I support performance pay for teachers? Yes, I do. A good teacher, I think, ought to be compensated for doing a good job. As far as the achievement gap, there is no silver bullet, and simply compensating a teacher more or less, depending on achievement, doesn't get at it. As a former school board member, I can tell you there's multiple ways to address this. Probably the single most important thing to do is to start early. And I look at some of the folks in the room, I know that your kids, like my kids, if you start by reading to them, I mean, the first thing is, as a parent, read to your kids early. But as far as in terms of what government's able to do, give early educational opportunities. We also just did voluntary all-day kindergarten, made that available across the state, regardless of where you live. So it's not just rich kids versus poor kids, it's every kid. And we've got, part of the reason we've got such a significant achievement gap in Minnesota is frankly because a certain population, namely white kids in Minnesota, do really, really well. Some African-American kids, some Hispanic kids, some other kids of color also do really well. But as a population, they're a little bit more challenged in terms of that achievement. So there's early ed, there's all-day voluntary K, and then the other thing is, believe it or not, making more AP classes available. That is one of the most beneficial things that we can do for young people, is make them available not just to the high achievers, but to everybody. The outcome of that actually benefits everybody. And with that, I'll turn it back to Don.
It always amazes me when people talk about things like pay for performance and claim that what you pay teachers has nothing to do with their performance. Every industry, every business pays their employees, and if they're not doing the job, they stop paying for them. And that produces a little better performance in the ones who are left behind, and it gets rid of the ones who aren't doing the job. In Minnesota, we have very strict rules imposed by the Minnesota legislature that say, if you get hired in a school, it's almost impossible to fire you. And if you're not at the bottom of the seniority list, you can't be fired. The legislature tried to change this and say, let's allow the local school boards and administration to fire teachers who are not doing the job. And the legislature said, nope, actually I think it was the governor who vetoed it. I mean, this is nuts. This isn't bad policy, it's just nuts, and it's a pattern. Legislature thinks that they have the solution for every school all across the state, and they don't. There are special interests who want that strict seniority system, Minnesota Teachers Union, and they get it because they make deals with legislators and make sure that they get what they want. I think it is reasonable to say that if you want to improve the situation of the schools, you have to give them some flexibility to do their jobs. The parents, the administrators, the teachers have a much better idea of what needs to be done to fix their education than do legislators. And frankly, I think legislators should butt out. And that would be mostly my plan if I get in the legislature, to give the local schools the flexibility to do their jobs. And to me, that is not rocket science.
In addition, what I would add, just because I'm afraid that there may not be additional educational questions, one of the key things that we have to work on in 2015 and 16 is fairer funding for suburban schools. Until the last election, we haven't had a cohort of suburban, regardless of politics, whether you're Democrat or Republican, suburban schools have gotten short shrift in terms of the funding equation because we just haven't had as much representation there. So my hope is that we will see a shift in terms of how suburban schools are financed when we get into session, regardless of whether you elect Don or me.